But St. Petersburg and all things Russian were what appealed to him most. On all sides, the gleaming domes of the churches, the spacious streets, and the charming canals were of profound influence on him. The buildings have a splendid appearance, of course, but they are not overpowering. There is plenty of grandeur. The Tsars were not exactly quiet spenders, but the city has an immensely human feel to it. People really can live here, and in the later years of the 19th century and the first years of the 20th, St. Petersburg was the cradle of an enormous activity in the arts, in writing, in painting, and of course, in music. Growing up amongst St. Petersburg's splendors, in his mid-teens he had some harmony lessons with his father's support and began composing short pieces, but it was looked on as spare-time activity. Much more effort went into language learning, which was well taught and at which he excelled. The gifted Stravinsky began studying at the university to be a lawyer, but the great Mariinsky building loomed large as ever in his life, with the statue of Glinka across the square, and he continued to compose. While he was still a law student, aged 20, he found that the father of one of his student friends was the great Rimsky-Korsakov, composer and professor of composition at the Conservatoire. While he was on holiday with his family in Switzerland, the Rimsky-Korsakovs were also there, and the professor was persuaded to look at some of Stravinsky's compositions. He recommended more study of harmony and counterpoint, but not at the Conservatoire, where he thought Stravinsky would be considered too backward. Stravinsky's father then died, and though he continued on as a law student, he spent more and more time at the Rimsky-Korsakov home. Eventually his talent began to be noticed, and the professor began to teach Stravinsky seriously, giving him 2 one-hour lessons a week. It was 1903, and Stravinsky was 21. The lessons continued for 3 years, perhaps the most valuable years of his life. Stravinsky had a number of good friends at this time, including the sons of Rimsky-Korsakov, and they read everything they could get their hands on. Together they began promoting a series of chamber concerts where they heard the works of contemporaries like the French composers Ravel, Debussy, César Franck, as well as the songs and chamber music of Brahms and Richard Strauss. It was heady stuff. Of course, Stravinsky was independently minded and didn't always agree with the tastes of Rimsky-Korsakov, who didn't like Tchaikovsky's music, for example, while Stravinsky revered Tchaikovsky above all others. But Rimsky-Korsakov's skills in orchestration were unparalleled, and he was a fine and devoted teacher, so Stravinsky was devoted to him in return. His first orchestral work, written under the professor's eye, was a symphony in E-flat. It was a major step, but although Stravinsky was a late starter, he was quickly in full flight in his musical career, and with the confidence of knowing that he was being well taught and had talent, he was unstoppable from this moment on. Early in 1906, Stravinsky married his first cousin, Catherine. They had always assumed from childhood that they would marry, and up to her death he always saw her as his best and closest friend. Along with Catherine came a country estate at Ustyluk in the Ukraine and near the Polish border. Since childhood he had known this place as a holiday refuge. There he designed and built a house where they went for holidays, and he happily composed there until he finally left Russia in 1914. Stravinsky's close identification with the Russian countryside stems from Ustyluk. Its trees and old buildings and the customs and music of the country folk were an enduring part of his life and music.